Every kitchen cupboard in Britain has one of those familiar tin sitting quietly next to the tomatoes, and the tinned tomatoes and the pasta, waiting for a slice of toast or a fry-up to justify its existence. Baked beans feel harmless, beige, boring, safe, the kind of food nobody thinks twice about. But once you start comparing tins side by side, reading the actual nutrition panels instead of the front-of-pack claims, a much messier picture starts to form. Some brands are quietly loading their sauce with sugar while marketing themselves as a health food. Others are stretching the tomato content so thin that what you're really buying is flavored water with a few beans floating in it. And a couple of supermarkets have been caught out by genuine quality failures that never made front-page news. I went through the UK's most popular baked bean brands, checked the ingredient panels, the sugar and salt figures, and what shoppers are actually saying once the tins open. So I will be exposing the ones that don't deserve the trust they've built. And afterwards, I'll show you the tins that genuinely get it right. Number 1. Heinz. Let's start with the one everyone assumes is untouchable. Heinz didn't just make baked beans popular in Britain, it basically invented what we think baked beans are supposed to taste like. And honestly, that's the problem. When a brand becomes the default, nobody questions it anymore. A standard 415-gram tin of Heinz beans will set you back around £1.40 in most UK supermarkets. And that price has been climbing. Earlier this year, Tesco actually pulled Heinz products from its shelves entirely after a pricing dispute, with trade reports showing the cost of a 4-pack of Heinz tomato soup jumping from £2.50 to £3.50 in a matter of weeks. That's not inflation catching up. That's a brand testing exactly how much loyalty is worth in pounds and pence. Now look at what's actually in the tin. Standard Heinz beans contain 4.3 grams of sugar per 100 grams and 0.6 grams of salt. Eat half a tin, which is what most nutrition guidance treats as a portion, and you're already looking at close to 9 grams of sugar and over a gram of salt before you've added a single sausage or a slice of buttered toast. The tomato content sits around 34%, sourced, according to the label, from southern Mediterranean growers in Spain and Portugal, bulked out with water, modified corn flour, and spirit vinegar. To be fair, Heinz does offer a proper reduced sugar and salt version, dropping sugar to 1.9 grams per 100 grams and salt to 0.4. That's a genuine improvement, and credit where it's due. But it sits on the shelf right next to the standard tin at nearly the same price, and most shoppers, out of habit, still reach for the blue label they grew up with. So, you're not paying extra for better beans, but you're paying for recognition. Number 2. Branston. Branston built its entire identity on being the bolder, thicker alternative to Heinz. Bigger sauce, richer body, more personality. And in some blind taste tests it genuinely wins on flavor. But that thickness comes from somewhere, and it isn't concentrated tomatoes. Branston's standard tin lists 37% tomatoes, water, sugar, salt, and modified maize starch as the ingredients doing the heavy lifting. In one independent taste comparison, Branston actually came out as the highest sugar option tested, at 5.9 grams per 100 grams, alongside 0.8 grams of salt, even outpacing Heinz's standard tin. That thick, clingy sauce people love isn't just good cooking, it's starch doing exactly what starch is designed to do, creating body cheaply, so the ingredient list can stay heavy on water without anyone noticing on the spoon. Branston does sell a reduced sugar and salt line too, cutting sugar to 2.8 grams per 100 grams and salt to 0.39. So here we go again, that requires a real improvement if you go looking for it. But the standard tin remains the one stacked highest on supermarket shelves, and it's the one most people are actually eating. Number 3. Asda. Asda's own label beans sit at the budget end of the shelf, and in a taste comparison run across 9 different UK supermarkets, Asda's tin came dead last. Reviewers described the beans as watery, with a tomato sauce so thin and bright red it barely coated a spoon. What makes that particularly frustrating is that the tin tested wasn't even the standard version, it was Asda's reduced sugar and salt line, the one marketed as the healthier choice, and it still couldn't deliver on basic texture or taste. When your better-for-you product can't hold its own against the full sugar competition on flavor, that's not a health upgrade. That's a product nobody bothered to properly reformulate. It simply had the sugar pulled out with nothing added back to compensate. Number 4. Co-op. Here's a strange one. In that same 9 supermarket comparison, Co-op came out as the most expensive single tin on the shelf, priced at £1.80, more than Heinz itself. For a supermarket own-label product to cost more than the market-leading branded tin is unusual, and it raises an obvious question. What exactly are you paying that premium for? The answer, according to the same tasting panel, was a decent but entirely unremarkable tin. Not overly sweet, a reasonably thick sauce, nothing offensive about it, but nothing that justified sitting above Heinz on price either. This is a tin coasting on the assumption that shoppers won't actually check what they're being charged against the branded alternative sitting one shelf along. Number 5. Lidl's Newgate Beans. Budget supermarkets have built a reputation for punching above their weight, and in plenty of categories that reputation is earned. Baked beans, according to consumer taste testing, is not one of them for Lidl. Newgate beans were singled out for having a noticeably harder, firmer texture than every other tin tested. The opposite of what you want from a bean that's supposed to have softened and absorbed sauce during cooking. When the base ingredient itself isn't behaving the way it should, no amount of sauce dressing can fix the eating experience. It's cheap, and it tastes like it's cheap in exactly the way that matters, in the bite. Number 6. Aldi's standard range deserves an honest mention here too, not because it's the worst on the shelf, but because of exactly how it achieves its low price. Look at the ingredient panel, and the tomato content in Aldi's basic tomato sauce is listed at just 6% tomato puree, propped up by glucose-fructose syrup, water, modified maize starch, salt, onion powder, and paprika. Compare that to Heinz's 34% or Branston's 37%, and you can see exactly where the savings come from. It isn't cheaper tomatoes. It's barely any tomatoes at all, replaced with syrup and starch doing the flavor and texture work instead. It's worth saying clearly, this applies to Aldi's most basic tin, not every product the brand sells, and that distinction matters, because Aldi's premium range tells a completely different story, which we'll get to. So that's 6 tins where price, branding, or reformulation quietly let shoppers down. Before I move on to the ones actually worth buying, if these kinds of investigations are useful to you, a subscribe genuinely helps keep this channel going. No sponsorships, no brand deals, just pulling ingredient panels apart so you don't have to squint at them in the supermarket aisle. Now, the tins that actually deliver. And the crazy news is that some of the most trusted names in British baked beans genuinely earn that trust when you check the numbers. Number 1. Waitrose Essential. In that same head-to-head comparison against Heinz, Aldi, Lidl, Morrison's, Co-op, Sainsbury's, Asda, and M&S, Waitrose's Essential Range baked beans came out on top overall. Not the flashiest packaging, not the most expensive tin on the shelf either, but consistently the best balance of thick, well-seasoned sauce and firm, intact beans. This brand is the perfect example of that sometimes the least marketed product in the range is the one nobody's had to cut corners on to hit a promotional price point. Number 2. Aldi's Premium Corali Range. This is the flip side of what I flagged earlier. While Aldi's basic tomato sauce leans hard on syrup and starch, its Corali premium quality baked beans are a genuinely different product. Tasters describe the sauce as thick and rich, a world away from the watery, syrup-heavy standard tin, and at around 47p for a 420-gram tin, 20 grams more than most competitors, it's arguably the best value on this entire list. It proves the point that Aldi absolutely can make a quality tin. Number 3. Marks & Spencer. M&S's baked beans sit in the mid-range on price, but noticeably lower on sugar than most of the competition, coming in at 3.7 grams per 100 grams, against Heinz's 4.3 and Branston's higher figures. The ingredient list stays relatively short too: 32% tomatoes, water, sugar, salt, dried onions, paprika, cornflour starch, and a touch of vegetable and garlic oil, with no preservatives listed. In taste testing, M&S's tin was consistently rated as one of the better options, with an attractive, well-balanced sauce that didn't need the industrial thickening some cheaper tins rely on. It's not the cheapest choice on the shelf, but the sugar reduction and the shorter ingredient list make it one of the more honestly formulated own-label options in the supermarket. Number 4. The reduced sugar and salt versions of Heinz and Branston. And this one comes with a genuine recommendation rather than a criticism. If you're going to buy a big brand tin, buy this one instead of the standard version. Heinz's reduced range drops sugar from 4.3 to 1.9 grams per 100 grams, and salt from 0.6 to 0.4. Branston's reduced line does something similar, down to 2.8 grams of sugar and 0.39 of salt. Both use steviol glycosides, rather than artificial sweeteners, to keep the flavor balanced once the sugar comes out. And both sit on the shelf at close to the same price as the standard tin. There is genuinely no good reason to buy the full sugar version of either brand when the reduced tin is sitting right beside it, doing less damage to your daily sugar intake for the same money. Number 5. Organic and minimal ingredient brands like Mr. Organic and Biona. These sit at the premium end, usually somewhere between £1.50 and £1.80 for a smaller tin, but the ingredient panel tells a genuinely different story to anything on the mainstream shelf. No glucose-fructose syrup, no modified starch propping up a thin sauce, just organic tomatoes, beans, and minimal seasoning. For anyone managing blood sugar or simply wanting to know exactly what they're eating, without decoding an ingredients list full of E numbers and starch derivatives, this is where that peace of mind actually exists. You're paying more per tin, but you're paying for tomatoes doing the work instead of syrup and starch faking it. So what's the actual takeaway here? Baked beans were never supposed to be complicated. Beans, tomatoes, a bit of seasoning, that's it. But once sugar, syrup, and starch quietly become cheaper substitutes for real tomato content, and once branding convinces you that a name you trust automatically means a better product, the humble tin stops being simple. The British Heart Foundation classes most canned baked beans as ultra-processed for exactly this reason. Added sugar, added salt, and thickeners that wouldn't appear in a version you made yourself. That doesn't mean baked beans are bad for you. A half tin genuinely does count toward your 5 a day, and they're a legitimate source of fiber and protein. It means the difference between a good tin and a bad one isn't the label on the front, it's the sugar and salt figures on the back, and whether the tomatoes in that sauce are doing the work, or whether syrup and starch are doing it for them. Next time you're standing in that aisle, flip the tin over before you decide. It takes 10 seconds, and on this evidence, it's worth every one of them.